Most people think strength means never getting knocked down. They are completely wrong. Real strength is letting someone throw everything they have at you and watching them exhaust themselves while you do not even flinch. That is not a superpower. That is a skill. And the Stoics figured out how to build it about 2,000 years before self-help became a billion-dollar industry. Here is the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to say out loud. Weak people are not strangers. They are your co-worker who panics and blames everyone else when a deadline moves. They are the friend who drains every conversation with manufactured drama. They are that one family member who has made every holiday dinner about their unresolved issues since 2009. Weak people are everywhere, and if you do not have a daily practice that fortifies your mind, they will get inside your head, set up furniture, and charge rent. But here is what gets really interesting. The Stoics did not just tell you to toughen up. They gave you a system, a repeatable, daily system. And the people who actually used it, they ran empires, survived exile, and outlasted their enemies without throwing a single punch. So what exactly were they doing every single morning that most people today are too distracted to try? The first thing is so simple, it almost sounds like a joke. Before the ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus did anything else with his day, he drew one hard line in his mind. He called it the dichotomy of control. On one side, everything you can control, your choices, your reactions, your effort, your attitude. On the other side, everything you cannot. Other people's opinions, the weather, whether your pitch gets approved, whether someone likes you back. Epictetus was not a motivational speaker. He was a formerly enslaved man who had zero political power and zero material wealth. And he chose to operate exclusively on the side of the line he could actually influence. That decision made him completely uncontrollable by anyone. Think about that for a second in modern terms. Imagine your boss publicly criticizes your work in a meeting. The average person spirals. They go home, replay the humiliation on a loop, lose sleep, eat badly, and arrive the next morning already defeated. The Stoic trained person asks one question: which part of this is actually mine to deal with? The criticism happened, cannot undo it. What they do next is entirely theirs. That single mental pivot drains the power out of almost every manipulation tactic weak people use. Because here is what weak people are actually selling you. They are selling you the idea that your emotional state is their property. Every guilt trip, every passive-aggressive comment, every dramatic scene is a transaction. They create chaos and wait for you to spend your peace trying to fix it. The moment you stop buying, the whole game collapses. And the way you stop buying starts with that one daily practice of sorting your world into what is yours and what is not. But knowing this is one thing. Actually doing it when your pulse is up and someone is in your face is a completely different challenge. And that is where the Stoics had a second daily tool that most people overlook entirely. They called it negative visualization. And no, it is not what it sounds like. It is not some toxic habit of imagining everything going wrong so you can spiral into anxiety. It is the opposite. Every single day the Stoics would spend a few quiet minutes imagining that something they valued was gone. A relationship, a job, their health, their reputation. Not because they were pessimists, because they knew that the human brain is wired to stop appreciating anything it sees every day. We call it hedonic adaptation. The Stoics called it forgetting, and forgetting is how weak people get leverage over you. When you have not thought about what it would feel like to lose something, you will pay almost any price to protect it, including your dignity, including your values. You will tolerate behavior that should be a hard stop, because unconsciously you are terrified of the loss on the other side. Negative visualization is the antidote. It reminds you that you have already survived imagined losses. It quietly asks, would I actually be okay without this? And more often than you expect, the answer is yes. And the moment the answer is yes, the grip of whoever was using that thing against you just disappeared. There is a reason executives who practice this version of Stoic thinking are historically harder to manipulate in negotiations. They have already sat with the idea of the deal falling through. It does not scare them, and the person across the table, whose entire strategy depends on you fearing the loss more than they do, suddenly has nothing to work with. Now, if you are thinking this sounds like detachment, like some emotionless robot lifestyle, you are missing the actual point. And the actual point is the most counterintuitive move in the entire Stoic playbook. Stay with me here, because this one quietly breaks people's brains the first time they really understand it. The Stoics were not trying to feel less. They were training themselves to feel on purpose. There is a massive difference between being dragged into an emotion by someone else's agenda and choosing to engage with an emotion because it is genuinely yours. One is a leash, the other is a compass, and the daily practice of distinguishing between the two is what separates someone who responds from someone who just reacts. Reactions are what weak people are counting on. Responses are what they cannot predict, cannot manipulate, and cannot survive. Here is something almost nobody talks about when they bring up Stoic journaling. Marcus Aurelius did not write meditations to publish it. He never intended for anyone to read it. He wrote it entirely for himself, as a daily audit of his own thinking, not a gratitude list, not affirmations, an honest, sometimes brutal cross-examination of whether his actions that day actually lined up with the person he claimed to want to be. That distinction matters more than you realize. Most journaling advice tells you to write about your feelings. The Stoic version asks a harder question. It asks, where did I hand my power away today? Where did I let someone else's bad behavior become an excuse for my own? Where did I react when I should have responded? Where did I agree to something I did not actually believe just to avoid friction? When you ask those questions daily and answer them honestly, you start to see patterns, and patterns are where your actual weak points live. Not the dramatic ones, the quiet, habitual ones, the ones weak people have already mapped and are quietly exploiting without you ever noticing. This is not self-criticism for the sake of feeling bad. This is reconnaissance. You are scouting your own terrain so that nobody else gets there first. Because the uncomfortable reality is that the people who most successfully manipulate others are not geniuses. They are simply more observant than their targets. They noticed what you want, what you fear, and what makes you flinch before you ever took the time to notice it yourself. Daily honest reflection closes that gap. It makes you a harder target by making you a more self-aware person. Those two things are the same thing, and here is where the Stoics introduced one of the most quietly powerful concepts in their entire philosophy. They called it the reserved action. The idea is this: when you set out to do something, you commit to it fully, while simultaneously holding a mental footnote that says, unless something more important intervenes. Not as an escape hatch, not as an excuse to quit, as a psychological release valve that keeps you from becoming so rigidly attached to one specific outcome that any disruption destroys you. Picture a fighter who has trained obsessively for one specific game plan. Their opponent does something unexpected in round one, and suddenly the fighter is not just losing the round, they are losing their mind. The plan is gone, and they have no identity outside the plan. That is not discipline, that is brittleness, dressed up as discipline. The reserved action is what gives you iron consistency in your values while remaining genuinely flexible in your methods. And flexible people are almost impossible to destabilize because they do not have a single pressure point to attack. Weak people need you rigid, they need you predictable, they need your self-worth wrapped so tightly around one specific outcome that they can yank the whole thing by touching one thread. The reserved action is how you untangle that. You want the promotion, but you are not destroyed if it goes sideways. You want the relationship, but you are not negotiating against yourself to keep it. You want the approval, but you can function without it at full capacity. Every single one of those shifts removes a lever that someone else was quietly holding. Now let us talk about the daily practice that ties all of this together. And it is embarrassingly simple, which is exactly why most people skip it. Every morning before the noise starts, before the phone lights up and the world starts making demands, the Stoics carved out what they called the morning preparation. Not meditation in the trendy sense, a deliberate intentional rehearsal of the day ahead. You run through what is likely to come, the difficult conversation, the slow driver, the colleague who takes credit for other people's work. The moment someone tries to bait you into an argument you never wanted, you rehearse your response in advance. Not the response of the version of you that is tired and reactive and just got ambushed. The response of the version of you that has already decided who they are, Athletes call this mental rehearsal. Sports psychology has decades of data behind it. The Stoics were doing it in 200 BC, with nothing but a quiet room and a clear intention. And what it does neurologically is remarkable. When you have already walked through a scenario in your mind and chosen your behavior in advance, the actual moment feels familiar instead of threatening. Your nervous system does not escalate the same way. You do not get hijacked. And the person who showed up to hijack you finds someone who is inexplicably calm and completely unbothered, which, if you have ever tried to provoke someone who genuinely did not take the bait, you already know is one of the most disorienting experiences a manipulative person can have. So here is the full daily practice stripped down to its bones. In the morning you prepare. You sort what is yours from what is not. You rehearse the version of yourself you actually want to show up as. During the day you practice the reserved action. You stay committed to your values and flexible in everything else. You notice when someone is trying to sell you fear or guilt, and you simply do not buy. And at night you audit, not harshly, honestly. You find the gaps and you close them. Repeat that cycle for 30 days, and you will not just feel different. The people around you will respond to you differently, because you stop being a predictable, reactable, manipulatable person and start being someone whose inner world is genuinely their own. That is what the Stoics were actually building. Not people who felt nothing, people who could not be steered by anyone who had not earned that right. And in a world that is noisier, more manipulative, and more emotionally chaotic than ever before, that is not just a philosophy, that is a survival skill. If this hit different, you already know what to do. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment with which part landed hardest for you, and subscribe, because this channel is just getting started, and you do not want to be the last one in the room who figured this out.